What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix for Week 5 of the 2021 CFL season. I'm Ryan Coop here with your wide receiver preview for Week 5 today. If you've missed it, go back, check out the quarterback and running back previews, and I'll have your defense preview out later today as well. Before we dive into the wide receivers, a quick recap of the new projection model that I've derived and started using this week. It's called the Valuable Production Model. Essentially, it boils down to, you want to hit a 100-point mark each week as kind of a good threshold to get a really top-tier score. You got $40,000 to spend to do so, which equates to you need 2.5 points for every $1,000 you spend if you spend right up to the cap to get to 100 points on the week. Given a player's salary, are they giving you 2.5 points per $1,000 spent? That's how I decide if a player is worth the good bang for their buck, worth the value that's going to get you to that point threshold you're looking to get to. Well, let's take a look at the wide receivers. And for wide receivers, I like to go game by game, team by team, because I think it's easier to talk about them within the context of their team and in relation to one another. So let's start off with the Friday matchup between the Montreal Alouettes and the Ottawa Red Blacks. Now let's go to Montreal first. Here's how I see the Montreal Alouettes at wide receiver this week. I think there's a couple green light options, a couple yellow light, and one red light of the notable receivers for the Alouettes. For me, the options I like, it starts with BJ Cunningham. $63.38 is his salary for the week. He's been averaging 13.2 points in 3 games so far this year, which puts him in that 2 points per $1,000 ratio range on average. He's already got 1 week over that 2.5 times range where he gives you the full value. He's had, a bit of down weeks, 10 points, 9 points the past couple of weeks, but that's not a bad floor necessarily. I like him as a consistently productive receiver in this Alouettes offense. And I think if they get back on track, Vernon Adams' completion percentage goes up, which I think it has to at some point. I don't think 15.8 points is out of the realm of possibility for BJ Cunningham, to get the 6-7 targets, 80, 90 yards, to get you closer to that 15, 16 point range. The other one I really like is Mario Alford, the kick returner. He's not going to get you points through the air. He's not involved in the passing game really for the Alouettes, but he's the return guy. He puts up an average of 7.9 points. He had a kick return touchdown earlier this year already. He is, in my opinion, one of, if not the best kick return guy in the CFL. At $33.81 salary, you need 8.5 points from him in order for him to be worth the full value for you. And I think he has the potential to put that up. His average week by week is pretty close to there. Granted, that average is padded a little bit by that 1 touchdown, but he's been putting up the big return yards in a lot of games. And I think against an Ottawa team that is going to kick the ball a lot. Right, they're going to punt an awful lot. That Ottawa offense is going to stall a ton if they continue on the trend they're on. There's going to be a lot of return opportunities for Mario Alford, and I think that's going to lead to a big day of return yardage for him, and maybe, just maybe, he picks up a touchdown as well. So I like him as an option this week to at least cover the 2 times the salary ratio in that 6.8 plus range, and I could see him hitting that 8.5 as well. The 2 options I have in the yellow light category, it starts with Jake Weineke, $7,018. He's averaging 12.6 this year. He's having a very fine start to the season. He's got a couple touchdowns. He has a 100-yard game. The only reason I put him not in the go-ahead category is because I think more often than not, his production is touchdown dependent. And with the way Montreal has all of these receivers and can spread the ball around, I'm not so sure that Weineke is going to put you up a 17.5 points if he does not get that touchdown, which I think is up in the air. I think he's a guy that you're going to see hover around, the 10-point range, 4 or 5 catches, maybe 40, 50 yards. So the 8-10 point range. Maybe he gets a touchdown, he can get you to that 14 to 16, but I think it's going to be tough for him on any given week to put you up, an 18-point performance with the way his salary has skyrocketed. I would have greenlit this option if he was still at the lower salary at like $5,000 salary he was at the start of the year. But at $7,018, I think the price has gone a little bit high there. For Eugene Lewis, I also have him in the yellow light category because, $7,401 so far. He's had a disappointing start to the year. He's averaging in that 1 point per $1,000 range at an average of 9.2 points per game. Has just not had the best start to the year. But if you look at the targets that and the way they've spread around for the Alouettes, Eugene Lewis has been the most targeted receiver for this team. It's just there's been a lot of incompletions his way. Now, some of those are drops from him. Some of them are overthrows by Vernon Adams Jr. But if he's the most targeted guy and they can get back on track a little bit with the completion percentage, we should see a big boost in Lewis's production. And in that game against Calgary in week 3, I believe it was, he was so close to getting in the end zone at the end of the game. I could see Lewis being a guy who can put you up, who can get you to that 18.5 point range and have a big week, or at least put you up the 15-point week if he can, haul in some of those targets. He's just in the yellow light category because the price is higher, and he has been a disappointment so far this year to some extent. But one of these days, we're going to see the wake up of Eugene Lewis. And, maybe you want to get in on that and hope that it's this week in a matchup with the Red Blacks. And then the option I'm staying away from is Quan Bray. He's the least targeted receiver in Montreal's offense. He comes in at 68.80. He's gotten a touchdown or two so far this season, gets you some production in that standpoint, but he's just putting up a couple catches a game only, averaging you 9 points. And at his salary, I don't see Quan Bray being a 17.2 point guy on any given week. I think you see him maybe as sure, he gets a touchdown, but that comes with, 3 catches, maybe 40 yards, something along that line. That would put you in the 13-point range. I don't think he gets you up to an 18 as the lead receiver for this Alouettes offense any particular week. So I'm staying away from him at that salary. Looking at the Ottawa Red Black side of things, there's one receiver here I really like, and that's a great value pick. And I think his price is going to start to rise as the season goes on. And that's Ryan Davis at $2,500. He was one of my big value pick suggestions last week. He put up a very nice 16-point performance even in a struggling Red Blacks offense. At $2,500, you only need 6.3 points to get the full value out of him. Well, he's averaging 10.9 this year. He's got a couple games over that range. He had one game, I think, around 5 points, so he was close to hitting that level. Look, you want to take a value pick and spend money elsewhere. So far through 3 games this season, Ryan Davis has delivered, and he's taking over the spot as one of those lead receivers in this Red Blacks offense. I think he's looking like one of the go-to guys for Matt Nichols and should do so again this week against Montreal. The other option I kind of like, I kind of don't, is Devontae Dedmon. I talk about him every week. One of the best returners in the league. Such a dynamic player. If he gets involved in the offense, if he's a starting receiver in that offense on top of the return duty, I'm putting him in my lineup any given week. I think he's such a dynamic player that can break a game open with his speed. He's averaged 10.1 points so far through 3 games this year. Puts him in that 2 points per $1,000 range. I think he has the ability to hit an 11.7 if he gets a couple touches on offense. But at $46.95, I'm a little bit hesitant on there just because I'm not sold on him getting the touches he needs for that. I think it'll be hard for him to put up, a big 12-point day just on the return yards alone. You're looking at, I believe, quick math, 300 return yards in order to get that, which I think is a bit of a stretch for any given week. So I'm cautious on Devontae Dedmon. And then in the red light category for Ottawa, I've got RJ Harris at his price point. His price is starting to fall, which makes him more intriguing. but just under $6,000. He's put up only 7.2 points this year, barely more than 1 point per $1,000 of his current salary. So he's a guy who should be the leading receiver for this Red Blacks offense, but has not really taken off besides the one game so far this year. He's had a couple big disappointments as one of the bottom receivers of the week. So given the struggles they've had, I don't know if I can project Harris having 15 points in week number 5 against Montreal. I think he falls back into more of a disappointment category. Maybe he gets you to 10 points, but he's not getting you the full value you need at that price. And then the other receivers, you've got a lot of them at $2,500. Nate Bahar had a big week, was I think the leading receiver for the Red Blacks last week, but he's had 2 other disappointing weeks as well. So he averages 5.7, but that was very heavily factored in by his week last week. I'm not sold on him producing that on any each week, one after another. So I'm staying away from Bahar. Peterman also has not put up any notable point totals so far this year. Same thing with Jordan Smallwood and Marco Dubois. So a lot of the lower end options at wide receiver for Ottawa, I'm staying away from until they get that consistent production. Even if you don't need a ton of it to get the full value out of them, I think there's some other great value plays elsewhere, such as Ryan Davis, who is in that Red Blacks offense, but is definitely the best of those value plays there. Taking a look at the Sunday game between the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Saskatchewan Roughriders, starting with the Bombers, there's a couple really great options here. Kenny Lawler has proved to be arguably the best fantasy option at wide receiver all season long. His salary keeps rising. It's now at $78.77. He's averaging 17.5 points a game, which puts him in that 2 times category there in that column. His 2 point, to get the full value out of him, you need 19.7. Look, he's had a couple games in that 19 to 20 point range this season. I think he would have had an even bigger day last week against Calgary. He had a super long touchdown that was called back a little bit. That took, I think, like 9 points off the board that he was really close on. He had a couple drops, would have added a ton to him too. I think even as his price rises, he's the go-to option. Zach Collaros loves throwing him the ball, seems to be the one guy he looks at most regularly, and will get you the targets, will get you the catches, and is an end zone threat. So I love Kenny Lawler. You're going to need, if you're following this model, you're going to need some higher priced options to get you to that cap. And Lawler is definitely one of the best bang for your buck, high priced options. Also really like Rashid Bailey at a middling price point. He started the season, I think, at $2,500. Now he's up to $4,453. And he's producing in that 2.5 times value so far. And he's had 3 great weeks in a row, 2 touchdowns in back-to-back weeks. And then last week he was the leading receiver. I think he got close to, if not over 100 yards against Calgary. He's becoming such a big factor in that Winnipeg offense, especially with Nick Dembski out. He's averaging 12.1 points a game this year, which is a very nice point total for that salary. I loved what Rashid Bailey is becoming as a receiver in this Bombers offense, and I think that's something to make note of going forward, as his price is very modest given the production he's been able to put up in the 13 to 15 point range. I think you get your value out of Rashid Bailey, and I think you get your value out of him again this week. In the yellow light category, we've got Darvin Adams, 65-62, 8.1 point average through 2 games so far. A very disappointing 2.4 point week this past week against Calgary, where the targets just didn't come his way. And, Darvin Adams is a game-breaking receiver. I think we see him often get those long touchdown passes, which if he's getting a 50-yard touchdown, that's putting you 12 points on the board. That should propel him to easily have a good day for you to get that full cover value at 16.4. But if you look at his target chart, go back to even to 2019, he doesn't get a huge volume of catches. It's in the 2 to 4, 3 to 5 range on any given week. So if he's not putting you up that long touchdown, I'm not so sure he covers that 16.4 range. Nick Dembski, I also have in this category. So far this year in 2 games, he's put up an average of 16.7. He's at a very fine start to the year. and has been in that 2.5 column. But I'm not sold. First of all, I don't think Dembski plays this week personally. He's missing practice again. I think he's going to be, he could be out longer term, which is why perhaps the Bombers brought in Naaman Roosevelt. So I'm not sold on him playing this week. And if so, I want to see how that injury impacts him before I necessarily put him back in my lineup again. And then I also have Charles Nelson in the cautious category here. 5.9 point average so far this year. Big return guy for the Bombers. He hasn't had too many huge breakout returns so far this year, but I know he's capable of them. At $2,500, you need just 6.3 points out of him to get your full value. He's hovering around 5.9, so he's really close in that regard. But I think there are better value plays elsewhere if you're looking for the $2,500. And if you're looking for a return man, some of the guys I mentioned I think are better bets, but Charles Nelson surely gets you close, I think, to that value you need from him. And then finally, players staying away from on the Bombers. I'm staying away from Naaman Roosevelt, the new addition. Look, he can only start practicing on Friday. And the game is on Sunday, so it's a really quick turnaround for him. If he is in the lineup, I want to see him get involved in a game or two first before I put him in my lineup and see how heavily he's used. I think he has that connection with Zach Collaros from their time in Saskatchewan, but I want to see from Roosevelt first of all what he does in this Bombers offense before spending $65.91 of my salary on him. Kelvin McKnight also. Staying away from him this week, $2,500, 5.7 points. It's not bad. I think he could get you the value potentially, but the Bombers seem to really lean heavily on Kenny Lawler, Rasheed Bailey. Expect Darvin Adams to get back to a couple more targets maybe this week. So I'm not sure McKnight gets you the full point total you need there. And Drew Wolodarski, 0 points last week. He's averaging 4. He's really not worth the $35.08 salary in CFL Fantasy so far this season, so I'm staying away from him as well. Looking at Saskatchewan Roughriders, a lot of or a couple really great value plays, I think, and really no terrible options here. Braden Lenius, to me, is one of the best value plays there is. His salary is still $2,500. He averages 10.8 points a game. He's covered that value you need at above 6.3 very finely so far this season. I think he's hovering around 9-10 points every single game. So he hasn't had a huge breakout game, putting you up 15-20 yet this season. But I think there's room for that. He's getting more involved in the offense, and I think that's going to come, especially if Jordan Williams-Lambert is out this week. I haven't seen the injury reports just yet. I know he left the game with injury last time around for the Riders. But no Shaq Evans. So Kyron Moore is the lead receiver, and there's room, I think, for some of these young guys to step up and be the next big piece. So I like Braden Lenius in that regard. I also like Mitchell Picton because he's covered the 2.5 points per $1,000 range so far this year with an average of 7.6. I think, Lenius is the better value play here. But certainly Picton has covered that range as well through 3 games. I'm in the yellow light category on Kyron Moore simply because of the price. Look, he's been one of the most consistent receivers this year. He's put up an average of 15.7 points a game, which is very nice and has been their go-to guy. But his salary has soared now to almost $9,400. You need a 23.5 point week from him in order to get that. The Bombers haven't given up a ton of touchdowns on defense so far this year. And in that regard, if you're not going to touchdown necessarily from Kyron Moore, then you're looking at you need, a 10-catch, 130-yard game or something of that regard to get you to the full value there. So I'm not sure he hits that. I see him this week, hitting somewhere in the 15 point range, a couple catches, 5-6 catches, maybe 70 yards, something like that. Maybe he puts the touchdown on the board, but I'm not sure he gets you that full value at such a high price point. I'm not even sure he gets you the 2 points per $1,000 ratio this week. So I'm cautious on him despite how good he's been. Jordan Williams-Lambert as well, bit of a disappointing, just 1 point per $1,000 ratio on average so far this year for him. He's close to that 1.5 range. I don't think 11 points if he's healthy and he starts getting the targets is out of the realm of possibility, but his average just hasn't been there this year. So I think he can get you your full value this week, but more often than not, he has not. So I put him as a cautious proceed with caution there. And then the two other options that got in last game, Kyan Schaffer-Baker, Paul McRoberts Jr., I have them both in the yellow white category just because they had nice debuts and put up 10.4 and 9.1 points. But I'm also not 100%. That's one game. It's such a small sample size. I want to see truly how they factor in another week or two before I slot them in as my value pick, especially when you have such a juicy option in a Braden Lenius at the same price point. Getting into the Monday games, let's take a look at the Hamilton Tiger Cats taking on the Argos. Two options I like here again are the cheaper options. Tim White, through 2 games, has had steady production, has been one of their go-to receivers, and has averaged 8.3 points, which covers that 6.3 total you need to get the full value at his price. And Stephen Dunbar Jr. had a massive day in his debut, 21.5 points. If you get that at a $2,500 salary, you're hovering around, 9-10 times the value per $1,000, I believe. So, I mean, that is an astronomical day if you can get that from Stephen Dunbar Jr. I'm not sold that he gets that extreme total again this week at that price point. I think it'll come down a little bit, presumably if they get Banks back on track, Ackland back on track. But I think he's an interesting value play if Hamilton's still missing Addison and Posey at wide receiver. I could see him fade into the background and possibly not even start if that's not the case. Looking at the yellow light category, Jalen Ackland, $56.15 salary. Look, he should be the second top option with Addison and Posey out so far this year. He was in the week 1. He was the best receiver for the Ticats in week 1. But in weeks 2 and 3, a bit of a disappointing performance from him. He hasn't gotten as heavy of the workload as I thought he would. So he's averaging 11.1 points. It's really close to that 2 times category. I'm cautious on him just because the last 2 weeks have been disappointments in his regard, but I also think he's a potential option because I don't think 14 points is out of the realm of possibility for him if he does get back to being one of the most targeted receivers. The price is fairly fair, I would say, for the potential that you have from Jalen Ackland. Could he put up another performance like he did in week 1 against the Bombers where I think he had 22 or 24 points? Yeah, I think he could put up easily a 15-point week. If he gets the targets his way, he gets a couple catches for some big yardage there. So I'm middling on Jalen Ackland. And then the options I'm staying away from this week are the highest priced options on the Ticat. Look, stay away from Brandon Banks for the foreseeable future. $13,466. If you're getting your true value out of Brandon Banks, you need a 33.7 point week, which is absolutely insane. In order to get that, you need, 10 catches, 140 yards, for example, just puts you at 24 points. You need a couple touchdowns there yet as well. You're not getting that production out of Brandon Banks on a consistent basis. You're very rarely getting it out of him. And especially this season, he's averaging just 10.1 points a game, which isn't even worth a point per $1,000 you spend on him. So stay away from Brandon Banks. I can't stress that enough. He's just not worth the fantasy value. Braylon Addison, Devere Posey, both have not played a game yet this year. For Addison, much the same way as Banks, to get your full value, you need a 27-point week, which is really tough to get unless you're getting 2 touchdowns on the board, I think. We're not seeing that necessarily from Braylon Addison. He can put those games up, but coming off of injury, I'm not even sold on him starting yet again this week. We'll check the depth charts as the weekend goes on, but I don't think he hits that 27-point range. I think 21.6 also in his first game back is going to be a tough mark to hit for him there to be truly worth the value. And same thing with DeVere Posey. I want to see him come back from injury, and I want to see how he factors into this Ticats offense before I'm buying in on Posey at $7,406. And then also staying away from David Unger III, who has put up just an average of 0.8 points this year and has not been a notable factor in that Ticats offense. Looking at the Toronto side of things, there's only one option I really love here. And that's because the Argos have so many great options. It's hard to know who's really going to be the breakout star. And I think some of their guys are a bit at the higher price range that they're not going to get you the full value. So I like Daniel Braverman. He's averaged 10.2 points through 3 weeks. The first 2 games of the year, he got involved in the offense, 5 catches, 8 catches. That really helped propel him over the top. Against the Bombers in week 3, he did not. He had 0 catches that game, but he still got a couple yards in the return game. And this is the same thing I talked about with Devontae Dedmon, and this is why I love Daniel Braverman as a pick so much. He's going to get you that floor of a couple points from the return game no matter what. If he starts factoring into that offense and gets a couple catches his way and gets the targets he got in those first 2 weeks, 6.3 points should be a breeze for Braverman to get you the fully value you need out of him. I think that 10.2 point range is something we should be able to see him hit if he gets those targets. And so I think he's got the floor, and at $2,500, I'm willing to risk him seeing a couple targets in that receiving game. Cautious on yellow light category, I put Ricky Collins Jr., $7,190 is his salary. You need 18 points for the full value from him this week. He's averaged 11.9, so just 1.5 points per $1,000 in that category. So he hasn't been totally worth it in every game yet this year at his current salary, but I think if there's any receiver for Toronto that I'm expecting to be kind of the heavy target load, get you a lot of catches, a lot of yards, I think it is Ricky Collins Jr. And I don't think he necessarily gets you to that 18-point range, but I think a 15-point week is not out of the realm of possibility for him. I think he could get you some decent value, if not the full value this week, but I'm also cautious just again because the Argos like to spread the ball around quite a bit. So I put him in that category. Eric Rogers, I put in the red light category because his salary is way too high at $88.36. He's averaged just 10.8 points a game so far this year. You need 22 from Eric Rogers. We need to start seeing him put the touchdowns on the board like he did in Calgary and get the majority of the targets in order for him to truly get you the full value. And I don't think he gets there this week. And Davaris Daniels, much the same way. He was the big guy in week 3 for the Argos. Put up, I think, a 22-point performance. Led all receivers, as far as I recall, around the league that week. But he's such a shifty, hot and cold receiver, I find. He can put up those big games for you, but then he also had 2 very disappointing starts earlier in this year. So his 10.6 point average is very heavily impacted by that game against the Bombers. I'm not sold he puts that up on any given week. I could see Daniels being in that 10-point category, around an 8 to 10 points maybe once again this week. If he is ready to go, I know he did suffer an injury against the Bombers in week 3, and so we'll have to monitor him throughout the practice week this week as well. And then staying away from some of the cheaper priced options. Curly Gittins Jr., Dejon Brissett have just not put up, have not factored into that offense wholeheartedly quite yet so far this season as mainstays there to get enough targets their way. And Levi Noel has been largely a backup and is not worth the $3,500 salary. So those are the options I like from the Argos. And let's move on to the final game of the week, the Calgary Stampeders and the Edmonton Elks. Here's a matchup where I think there's a lot of great fantasy options available to you. Starting with the Stampeders, I really like Josh Huff this week. And I think he's probably, honestly, a lock to put in my lineup for myself. Comes in at $5,039. He's been averaging 12.4 points so far this year. His first game or two were a bit more of it on the disappointing side, but in back-to-back weeks, he's been one of the go-to receivers for Jake Mayer at quarterback. They've built some chemistry there. You need just 12.6 points because he has such a great value to get you the full point total this week, and I think that's easily doable. He's done that in back-to-back weeks and had a fantastic fantasy performance in both of those as a go-to receiver for this offense. He's a big play guy. He can get you that one big play you need, and he'll get his steady dose of targets from Mayer as well. So I love Josh Huff as an option. I also really am starting to like Markeith Ambles as an option. At 60.53, he's a little more expensive than Huff. I like Huff as the better option, but I think Ambles has the potential. His average is rising in the last couple of weeks. I think he can put you up at least that 12-point mark. He can put you up a 15, 16-point game because what I've noticed so far from the two starts Mayer's had is Ambles seems to be the more steady target, reliable second down type of option. Josh Huff seems to be the guy they target on the big play. So I think both of these are great options, given that offense and the way things are rolling. I also like the return guy, Malik Henry. He's had a solid average this year, 7.9 points as primarily a returner. Covers that full value you need of over 6.3 points. And the thing I really like is the matchup with the Elks, because if you recall, Mario Alford had himself a big day in the return game against the Elks, brought one back for a touchdown earlier this year. So I could see Henry having picking up a lot of yards, picking up a solid performance in the return game. They've also tried to factor him into the offense a little bit. One or two targets each week. It's nothing huge to write home about. But would put you in a couple extra points on the board to help at that $2,500 salary. So I'm high on Malik Henry and put him in the green light category in this matchup with the Elks. And then two options I'm staying away from in Calgary. Kamar Jordan, another situation kind of like the Eric Rogers, kind of like the Braylon Addison. You just need such high production to get the true value from him at $94.99. Salary. 23.7 points is what you need to get the full value out of Kamar Jordan. And so far this year, he's averaging 12.9. He hasn't gotten, I don't even think he's the go-to receiver that I expected him to be for Jake Mayer. Last week against the Bombers, he did get more targets his way, but I don't think he's covering the full value you need at such a high price point, especially with all the other great options at Calgary's receiving core. And then Hergy Mayala, $55.88 is his salary. He's averaging just 5.2 points this year, which is less than a point per $1,000. Until he gets back on track to the level of play we saw from him in 2019, I say stay away from putting Hergy Mayala in your lineup. And finally, we get into the final team, the Edmonton Elks taking on the Stampeders. Interesting situation with the Elks coming off of the week off due to the COVID outbreak there. It's really hard to tell how that's going to affect this team, which players will be affected by it. Supposedly, Darrell Walker and Shai Ross both missed a practice yesterday, the first day back at practice. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, certainly. But it's going to be hard to tell from the Elks this week what to expect from them after they had 14 players test positive. We don't know which players, which side of the ball, what extent, their symptoms were, any of that stuff. So that's hard to tell. But taking a look at the options available, not taking that necessarily into account, giving them the benefit of the doubt of being at their full game level. I like Darrell Walker this week, $7,070. He's averaged 11.9 points so far this year, but he's such a game-breaking receiver that 15 points, if he gets the targets his way, should be no problem for him. 18 points should be no problem for him if he gets those 6-7 catches, some nice yardage. And I think against a Calgary team that's given up a lot in the passing game, I think there's room to pass against them. And I think Trevor Harris has got to get back on board with throwing touchdowns at some point. And I expect Darrell Walker to be one of the guys he looks at near that end zone to pick you up the touchdown. So he has, a decent high salary, but is one of the lower priced, high value receivers. So I like Darrell Walker to cover his production value. I also like Shai Ross again at $2,500. Need 6.3 points from him to get the value. You're getting an average of 9.5. He's been a big surprise factor in that Elks offense, a nice surprise, getting himself a couple targets each and every game and picking up, I believe, 1 or 2 touchdowns on the year as well. So those are the options I like for the Elks. Yellow light category, I've got Greg Ellingson, who struggled the first 2 weeks of the season, but had himself a monster game in week number 3. That's the Greg Ellingson we're used to seeing. He put up, I think, 23 points that week, which would cover the full value you need from him. But I'm not sold on him getting that every single game. I think the price is a little high there for me. I think if, he got a lot of the targets that game, Darrell Walker didn't get as many. I see that evening out a little bit more this week against Calgary. So Walker should take some of those targets back away from him. So I put him in the yellow light because I think he does have the potential to get you the value you need. But with his price being so high, you need a really big game from Ellingson. You're going to need him to be getting those big numbers of targets like he did in week number 3. And so I could see him at that price point being a bit of a disappointing day and not getting you the full value you need as well. I also have Mike Jones in this category. He's a tough one to place for me because he's been a nice producer so far in this offense for Edmonton. He comes in at $4,028. He's averaging 9.3 points a game. He's getting the catches. He got a touchdown. 10.1 points. I think he could cover that potentially as well if he stays as involved. But also, Edmonton's going to be looking to get Walker back on track, Ellingson on track on a consistent basis, Armonte Edwards, if he's in the lineup, back on track. You have to think they're going to be leaning on those 3 big name players more heavily, or trying to at least. So I could see Jones fading a little bit into the background as the season goes along here. So I'm cautious on him at that $4,000 salary. And then players I'm staying away from this week, Armonte Edwards, coming off an injury, missed week 3, missed week 4 due to the team's game being postponed. In the 2 games he's played, he has averaged just 4.2 points and comes in at a really high salary of $77.81. I do not expect Armonte Edwards to put you up a 20-point week. I don't expect him to put you up even a 15-point week. I think you're lucky if you get 10 out of him this week. Until we see him back on track in a consistent basis, I do not expect him to get you the nearly the value you need at that price. And same thing with Tavon Smith. $63.09 is a very high price point for a guy that factored in, I think, as a backup in the first couple of weeks. He got the starting job with Edwards being out last game, but he's averaging just 5 points a game so far this year, and I'm not sold on him getting enough production to put you up the 15.8 point value to get you the 2.5 points per $1,000 you need from the receiver there. So those are the options I have in the green light, yellow light, and red light category at receiver. I think there's a couple higher priced options that are good and are going to get you there, cover the point value you need. But a lot of them are frankly just way too overpriced to get you the kind of production that's going to be worth putting in your fantasy lineup. I like a lot of the value plays to cover the values you need from them. And there's some great middle priced options there as well. So using a combination of those, you should be able to get yourself to a lineup that's close to that 40,000 cap space range that is going to hopefully cover you the value you need to get a 100-point week. If you missed it, go back, check out the quarterback and the running back previews. Those are out already. I'll have the defense preview out later today as well. And then on Friday, I will have a depth chart and injury report update as you get set to set your lineup before the first game of the week. Do all the YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't. If you have any fantasy questions, put them in the comments section. Tweet them at me at CooperTrooper42. I always love talking CFL Fantasy with whoever wants to chat about it with me. So, do that. And as always, thanks for watching. Have a good one. Take care. Bye.